All right, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us. I am Rosie McCool with the Chief Probation Officers of California. I want to welcome you this afternoon to the first of our informational webinars. So really just appreciate you joining us. This is a new feature that CPOC has launched, and so we'll be doing these on Friday afternoons. On different topics, not necessarily every Friday, but as we have new, relevant, timely information to share with all of you, we want to make sure that we're getting that out as quickly as possible and as to all probation departments. So we hope this will be a tool that will be very useful to all of you moving forward. And it will cover a variety of topics. Sometimes the focus will be on juvenile probation, other times it will be on adult probation, but we want to make sure that we're doing our best to get as much helpful information out to the field as possible. So with that, as I mentioned, this is our inaugural webinar, and so very excited to have two presentations this afternoon for all of you. These two are specifically focused on services for youth who will be paroling out of DJJ onto supervision by county probation departments, and they are very focused on two distinct subsets of youth. And so I will be focusing on first transitional housing services for youth at DJJ who are at risk of homelessness. And then our second presentation will be focusing on reentry services for youth exiting DJJ who were former foster youth. So very specific subsets of youth, but very helpful and timely information, we hope, for the reentry plans that you all are preparing and working in concert with DJJ for those youth who will be returning to the community over the next several months. So with that, I'm going to introduce all of our speakers, and then we will be starting with the Board of State and Community Corrections. We have Erin McGuire, who is the Chief Deputy Director and General Counsel for the BSCC, who will be focusing on the Transitional Housing Program. And then we also have Kendra Jackson and Shekinah Pareto, who are both Associate Government Analysts with the Department of Social Services, the Office of the Foster Care Ombudsperson, who will be focusing on the reentry services for youth who were foster youth at the time of their commitment to DJJ, who were near their 18th birthday. So with that, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. Just want everyone to know, due to the large size of attendees, we have disabled the chat function, and we are focusing and taking questions via the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. So please feel free, as you have questions, type them into that screen, and at the conclusion of each presentation, I'll facilitate and ask the questions that we receive to our speakers. And so we'll do that at the conclusion of each topic area to make sure that we leave time for all of your questions so that we can share that information with you as well. And then secondly, I know folks always want to get copies of the PowerPoints because we will have two PowerPoints this afternoon. We will be sending those out this afternoon, so you should receive those if you are interested in receiving that information post the webinar. So be looking for that in the near future, but we will, all of our speakers have agreed for us to share that with you. So do want to thank them for that and really for their time this afternoon. So with that, we will transition to our first presentation from Erin McGuire with the BSCC. Welcome, Erin.
Thanks, Rosie. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be there this afternoon, and hopefully we'll be able to provide you some useful information, assuming I can once again figure out how to share my screen. Let's see if that works. Can you see that, Rosie?
We can. You are good.
All right. Yeah, this is and the timing of this is pretty good. This is a new program that was established just in this year's budget that the governor just signed in the Budget Act of 2022 and AB 178. So this is a new program that the BSCC is looking to administer for this year, specifically with regards to youth paroling out of DJJ in this fiscal year and allowing them to get some additional transitional housing services that the county can look to provide. So this was a $3 million item in the budget, in the BSCC's budget, and specifically it is to contract with one or more public or private organizations, including but not limited to nonprofit organizations, state or local government agencies, to secure and fund up to 1 year of transitional housing for youth that will be discharged from DJJ by the Board of Juvenile Hearings during fiscal year 2022 to 23, and specifically that are at risk of homelessness. To be eligible to receive these services, the youth must be 18 years of age or older and have been discharged by the Board of Juvenile Hearings between July 1 and June 30th, 2023. In terms of what we're looking at, the scope of who might be eligible for this, and some of these numbers might be just a couple of weeks old as we were putting this information together, but there's approximately 293 youth that are currently at DJJ that could be discharged by June 30th of next year. And at least right now, what DJJ is tracking, they do get information from the counties in terms of placement information and placement plans. And at least at the time we were gathering information and putting a request for information out to the field, which we'll talk about shortly, DJJ had identified approximately 50 youth that didn't have any placement information. That's not to say that those youth aren't going to get placed somewhere, but that's just the number that DJJ currently didn't have any information for. And some of the reasons might be they may not be getting discharged until February, March, very late next year, or other reasons. In terms of who the youth coming out of DJJ, which counties are impacted by that, in terms of who currently has youth at DJJ, this is the list of counties in alphabetical order. If you read it horizontally, starting from the top, these are the counties that currently have youth at DJJ. So we're looking at providing services to those counties in particular, recognizing, however, that there might be a situation in which a youth may be getting returned to their county of origin, maybe getting discharged from that county, but maybe looking to move to a different county for whatever reason. So recognizing that there could be a potential impact to a county that's not on this list, and we would still be looking to provide transition services to a county, even if they don't currently have a youth at DJJ. And the way we're hoping to do this, we're looking at two different types of models in order to provide this housing services if they're necessary. The first is we're looking at right now contracting with a provider to manage this program, specifically to have a network of providers, housing providers in different counties that probation could reach out to and work with directly on these placement needs. And the way we're looking at getting this contract is we put out a request for information on July 19th. The responses were due actually yesterday, and we just got those responses back. We're going through them right now. We received about 5 respondents who provided us with some additional information. And again, the idea is counties would, if we end up contracting with this type of provider, counties would work directly with the provider in terms of working to find that housing. But BSCC will enter that contract directly with that provider. Counties wouldn't have to enter into any other contracts in order to receive those services, but those services would be available to you. We're not sure how long it's going to take, assuming we have responsive information that is useful to us in terms of we're going to review all those proposals, and how long it takes to get a provider under contract, we're not sure yet. It could take some time, but we're looking at trying to get that done, obviously, as soon as possible. So that's one way we're hoping that we can manage this program. The alternative, though, is if we don't have a provider that meets all of our needs, and certainly what we've seen so far is just very quickly looking at some of the responses. We had one response that just said they're willing to service one particular county. And that's not going to be a statewide solution for us. So obviously we would need additional resources to provide that housing. And so what we're also looking to do is let probation departments contract directly with the BSCC. And what we'd be looking to do is to just reimburse counties directly for providing those additional housing services to this discrete population that are at risk of homelessness. We're working on that application form right now. We're hoping that we might have those posted as early as next week on our website, and that you'll be able to look and contact us directly and provide that information to us. If you are a probation department who's looking at this program, this sounds like you want to avail yourselves of contracting directly with the BSCC. Information that we're going to be asking for on this application form: why do you need this funding? Why isn't this need being addressed by other sources of funding that you might have? We'll ask for you to tell us, why is this particular youth or youths at risk of homelessness? Are there limited placement options in county or city that you're looking at? Is there a changed circumstance? Did a family member say they'd be happy to take that person 6 months before they were discharged at DJJ, and then when the person actually ended up at the house, the family decided they wouldn't be able to house that person? Is there a need for supportive services that other housing providers aren't able to provide, and you're looking to augment existing housing services? We're not looking to pay for supportive services on their own. It has to be part of transitional housing, but if you have a need for supportive services that are part of a wraparound transitional housing program, we will be happy to pay for those services that go along with that housing component. We're going to ask you for a budget. We're going to ask you how many number of bed days and what the cost will be, just so we know how much we're going to reimburse you for, but also whether or not how far we can make sure that this funding can go. We're going to ask you that this funding is not to supplant existing funding. This is really for, again, a unique situation of a youth just doesn't have housing, and they're at risk of homelessness because existing resources are not sufficient to address what this youth is dealing with. So we're going to just ask you to acknowledge that you're not going to supplant existing funding resources. And then in terms of what information we need about the youth, we're very concerned about confidentiality. The BSCC is not really equipped on an IT side or otherwise to receive personal identifying information regarding youth. We don't want names, addresses, telephone numbers, social security numbers, CI numbers, anything like that that might go along with identifying youth. We would be looking to, first initial, last name initial, that kind of tracking. We want to make sure we have some kind of audit trail. So if there's a question of where the money has gone in terms of this youth being discharged from DJJ, we want to be able to track that. But we don't want the details on what that youth's personal information. So we want to make sure confidentiality is kept in terms of providing the services for the youth. But then, yes, of course, we'll ask you to keep supporting documentation. So in terms of what we're looking at in next steps, and again, we're trying to get this program up and running as fast as possible. But as I mentioned, we just received those proposals. We're going to go through them and review them as quickly as possible, and potentially hire a contractor that could service and meet the needs of either different regions in the state or the whole state. But what we'd ask you to do, if you're hearing this idea of working with a third-party provider and that doesn't sound good to you, and you're not going to want to go down that route, and instead, but you really would like to seek reimbursement from the state for these other types of services, we would ask you to reach out to us just as quickly as possible. Let us know you want to contract with us directly to provide the services yourself. And that way, as we're looking at still hiring potentially a contractor to manage other parts of the state, that we can scope that agreement correctly. We don't want to have to pay to cover Santa Barbara County if Santa Barbara County is just going to do what they want on their own. So if you could get that information to us as soon as possible, that would be very helpful to us in terms of managing the program and providing the services as best we can. With that, I just want to give you some contact information. That is my contact information on the left. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And then the other contact information, Michael Shores, who's a field representative in our office. You may have worked with Mike if you had the SB 81 project. You may have been in contact with him, or the SB 823 infrastructure funding that has been run through our CFC division as well, that Mike's part of. So he's going to be the day-to-day point of contact in terms of running this project, and any questions, logistics can also go to Mike. So with that, Rosie, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions best I can.
Great. Thank you so much, Aaron. A lot of great information, and definitely very excited to hear of the second option to access the funds, especially for those jurisdictions who may not have vendors that have submitted for the RFI, that there still be an opportunity for those departments to access these funds for youth who may be at risk of homelessness. So, which is one of the first questions that we received. And so you mentioned, I know on one of the slides it spoke to the RFI date has closed. And so for interested probation departments that want to avail themselves of this opportunity, it sounds like there is a window of time for them to submit their interest to the BSCC. And you mentioned an application. And so should they just follow that slide that had the information that they can send to you if they know they want to kind of put in their marker now, or wait for that application to come through?
I could say, let's say both for now. Go ahead and shoot an email to Mike Shores or myself, just as we are interested in a direct reimbursement process. My hope is we get those applications up on the website next week, and then we will alert you also, Rosie, when those applications are up on the website for people to draw down. So you can certainly wait till next week when those forms are available, or you can shoot us again a quick email that says we're going to want to work with direct reimbursement. So save a place for us.
Yeah, that's helpful. So you have all the applications that you received from the vendors, and so you anticipate, obviously you can't say right now, but there would be some funding that would be accessible directly for probation departments, unless you just did not get any probation departments reaching out to you in the next week or so.
Correct. And so, the balance we're trying to strike is, again, we've the request for information really wasn't geared towards probation departments. The request for information really was for that vendor opportunity. And so again, we're looking at exploring both paths, which is maybe we can find a vendor who's willing to work with everyone in the state. But barring that, we just want to make sure that people have the opportunity to contract with us directly as well. So it'll be we want to run both processes at the same time.
Yeah. And there was a request, and maybe while we go through the next question, if you could share your screen again and show that last slide with the contact information.
Oh, sure.
And while we're doing that, we got a question. If you could review the dates of eligibility, I believe it was for youth who were exiting DJJ back into the community during a certain time frame.
Yes, so they have to be being discharged from DJJ from July 1st of 2022 through June 30th, 2023. So the window of eligibility is for those youth who are discharged in that time period, and then the housing availability that we're able to pay for is 1 year following discharge. So if someone is discharged on June 30th, 2023, we will provide funding for housing for that youth through June. Make sure I got it right. June 30th, 2024. So up to a year of housing for that particular youth.
Okay. Thank you. So there could be, once these awards, the contracts are entered into, there could be youth right now that could access these services if they met the eligibility criteria, because the window is already open.
Yes.
Once the contracts are made. Okay.
Yes.
Another question we received, and actually while we're waiting, if you could go back to, while we have your slides up, just to slide 7, that I think that had the information that you wanted folks to send to you, just for those that want
Well,
to.
this is going to be part of the application sheet. So don't send us this information right now. This is the type of information that's going to be on the application.
Oh, okay.
So
Then-
this is, just keep this in mind for now. This is the type of stuff we'll ask you for, but this will be on the formal application once it's available.
All right, perfect. Another question we received was regarding an eligible youth who transferred jurisdictions. Would the originating county have to apply, or would the new jurisdiction have to apply? I think that would need to be worked out between the two counties, I would imagine, and who has supervision, but
Yeah, again, and it probably would depend on the circumstances. If the receiving county is actually retaining a jurisdiction, a supervisorial jurisdiction where they're going to be actually on an active caseload, we would probably ask that the receiving county contact us in that case, if that's the issue, and we would work with that receiving county to make sure that we reimburse them directly. Or again, in the alternative, if we have this vendor who has a referral network within the county, we could do a placement that way as well.
Thanks, Aaron. We have another question about, will this transitional housing be available to youth being discharged from a county's secure youth treatment program as well?
No, it is not. This is strictly for youth that are being paroled from DJJ in this time period.
And so I will just pause for one more moment in case there are any other questions, and I'm going to look through to make sure. I think we answered the ones that I had, and I do, and thank you, Aaron. You mentioned in your slides as well that you will get that information out to probation departments once decisions have been made on the contracts, and also to CPOC, and we'll get that information out to all the probation departments as soon as that's available.
Yep.
All right. Oh, got one more in. This next question, and you may not be able to answer this until you have more time to look at all the RFIs, but will there be a monetary limit per county, or is it first come, first serve until the money is gone?
I think we are probably, I would say probably couldn't say for sure right now. Most likely, I anticipate it'll probably be closer to first come, first serve. And again, the monetary limit is reasonableness. Certainly what we're looking for is, again, counties have some existing resources, and we're looking for using this funding to potentially plug gaps where, again, maybe there's a higher level of supportive services that are needed. Those cost more. So we don't necessarily want to, at the outset, say we're absolutely capping daily rates at a set level. We want to make sure that there is some flexibility in here, and if a need arises that is we can help with, we want to be able to do that. So we'll see.
Right. And if I recall, the target population is for those that are at risk of homelessness, is the target population for the program.
Yes. Yeah, that's the target. And you know, arguably there's that may be covering everyone at a DJJ, but what we've seen is that this funding really isn't supposed to be for as a replacement for plans that have already been made. So, you know, if you've got a youth, you know, that's coming to you, already has a housing plan in place, we're not looking to give funding for that youth that's already taken care of. This really is to cover issues where either in maybe an emergency situation where the housing suddenly fell through and there's resource not available, or again, there's a placement problem because, for example, maybe they're a 290 registrant and there's no placement within where the person lives. We're willing to enhance funding that might be available so we can place those youth, but it's not a replacement for existing housing services that counties are already providing.
And then the last question was just about whether or not we're going to be sending out these slides, the presentations. And so, yes, we will definitely be sending out a copy of both this presentation and our subsequent presentation later post this webinar. So definitely be looking for that in your inbox, because we know we have valuable information that folks will want to go back and review. So we'll definitely be distributing these, and do want to thank our speakers for allowing us to do so. And Erin, just want to thank you for your time this afternoon and sharing this information with us, and sharing your contact information. I'm sure you're going to get questions from folks after this afternoon to get a little more information about the program, and maybe some timing of when more information will be available. And so do thank you. And just to reassure everyone, as we get more information, we will definitely share that with probation departments. So, but thank you very much, Erin.
No, thanks for having me, Rosie. I really appreciate it.
So now we can shift to our second presentation. And so just want to welcome Kendra Jackson and Shekinah Perito, who, as I mentioned, are with the Office of the Foster Care Ombudsperson with the Department of Social Services, who are here to share some additional information on reentry services. So welcome to you, Kendra and Shekinah, and I will turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Rosie.
You're very welcome. And your screen looks great.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, thank you all so much for taking the time to attend this webinar and to learn more about how to connect former foster youth exiting DJJ to reentry and AB 12, also known as Extended Foster Care Services. So before I begin, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Shekinah Perito, and I'm an analyst with the Office of the Foster Care Ombudsperson. I'll be co-facilitating with my colleague, Kendra.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kendra Jackson, also an analyst in the Office of the Foster Care Ombudsperson, and really excited to be here today to talk to you all about the foster youth verification letters and the services that our offices provides to youth who are actually experiencing reentry or who've been impacted by the justice system. So a lot of the work I do in this office is with this population. So again, really excited to be able to share this with you guys today. Oh, and it's my turn again. So since I'm so excited, I'm going to talk about what we are going to learn today. So we're going to talk about how the California Foster Youth Bill of Rights pertains to justice-involved youth. We recently presented at the wonderful conference that CPOC actually hosted. Shekinah and I were able to present on the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. So this will be a different, it's going to just pertain to the verification letter process, again, for justice-impacted youth. We're going to learn about the process to request the verification letters for youth who are justice impacted, and the importance of these letters, specifically for reentry and educational purposes.
All right, so one of the most important pieces of legislation that impacts our office's work as well as the youth that you all work with is the Foster Bill of Rights. So youth in foster care now have 41 rights listed in law in WIC 16001.9. And what this new law did was it reorganized, clarified, and expanded the Foster Youth Bill of Rights. It also mandated our office to develop new publications and training materials to teach youth as well as other stakeholders about the Foster Youth Bill of Rights in an age-appropriate manner, as well as to really clarify and solidify our office's role as providing training and technical assistance to individuals who are working to uphold youth's rights and as well as work with youth in general. So the Foster Youth Bill of Rights applies to youth in foster care, so if they have a dependency case, but also to youth on probation who happen to be in an out-of-home placement, as well as youth placed by the Office of Refugee Resettlement, or ORR. So the Foster Youth Bill of Rights applies to all these populations of youth.
So as Shekinah did mention, AB 175, there are now 41 rights, but we are here specifically to talk about the rights that pertain to the youth that are justice involved. So it's actually in two categories, because any youth that has spent time in foster care or in an out-of-home placement is eligible to receive a verification letter, again, for the eligibility and the services. And then later on in the presentation, as we were already talking about with as far as with the housing, we're going to go more into it with extended foster care and non-minor dependents, where there's a more specific component that the verification letter satisfies for these youth to have additional services, additional to what everyone would be entitled to. So we have all these different categories and themes, but for the purposes of today's presentation, the ones that we're going to focus on are going to be under the education category, under the adulthood and money management category, and under the records or court records case plan. Record rights would be the other one, and that would fall under courts. So those are the ones specific to the justice involved youth that we're going to talk about those rights today, specific to the verification letter process.
So here's a quick overview of the education rights that youth in foster care have. Like Kendra said, some of the main focuses that we will be looking into is how verification letters can be used to uphold these education rights. More specifically, for the population that you all work with helping youth re-enter, it's in regards to priority enrollment at California state universities and community colleges, and also accessing information about college and career education programs. So the verification letters that our office provide can show these various education institutions that this youth is eligible to have not only priority enrollment, but to have access to foster youth serving programs. And Kendra will get more into that later on, so we can share with you all what kind of programs are available to the youth.
Also, my favorite right in the update is the preparing for adulthood and money management. I think this is a very important right for youth to be able to have. I always share my time of me being in foster care in Sacramento County when there was no extended foster care and there was no skills on how to manage money. And so I think that this is a very important right. I think especially in pertaining to youth who are justice impacted, who might not have been able to work on these skills. And it also is because when we get to talking about them being non-minor dependents and living on their own, the least restrictive placement that they would be able to have would be a SILP, which would be a supervised independent living placement. And so these would be the skills that these youth would have to already have been in practice in order to be eligible, to be considered eligible to be able to live on their own. So this is why I think that this is really a very important right for this population of youth as well, especially regarding the credit report, because if they are considered to be in foster care or under this umbrella, they do have a right beginning at age 14 to get a credit report every year to make sure that their credit or their social security number or anything that identifies them is not being used improperly during the time that they are, so that when they are able to be on their own, they don't have to go over additional barriers in order to get that information fixed to be able to have housing and to be productive.
And lastly, our verification letters tie in closely with records rights. So youth have the right to have access to their records, specifically medical records, child welfare records, juvenile court records, and educational records. We receive so many calls from a lot of youth who either have missing records and then have difficulty either applying for a California state ID or even getting a copy of their social security card. And then that also leads to them having trouble even applying for jobs or trying to apply for apartments or even trying to get a car. So it's really important to ensure that youth have access to these records and are able to have them already prepared once they re-enter, so that there won't be those additional barriers that they experience trying to start a regular adulthood and transition out. So this is where the verification letters come in, especially during this preparation stage where all the paperwork is being set. A verification letter can really help set the tone for what sort of services that you will be eligible for, depending on the age that they had exited foster care.
And in addition, the records rights are very important because everything is intertwined. So you have a youth, specifically in this population, that would be justice impacted, that might want to get out, and this youth wants to go to school. So then sometimes they have to show things to prove, okay, you were in a secured facility. They might need something to show, okay, that they're no longer on probation and different types of things. So the ability for the youth to have a verification letter, to not have to pay 25 cents per page for a copy of a minute order is the difference between that youth being able to go to college and that youth not being able to do that, and that youth not being able to go to college. In addition, they might need educational records to show for anything, but they all intertwine. So it's very important that they have this access, again, because if they not have the money to pay for these copies, again, would be a barrier that would result in them not being able to get the services that they are entitled to. Okay, so now we're going to get into talking about the actual verification letters and the importance and the purpose of these verification letters. In our duties here at this office, we do take complaints, but the main thing we do, especially right now, in January and August is our really big season for verification letters, because that's when school starts. And so they need these letters so that they're able to get the priority registration and the financial aid and all the different things that we're going to talk about next. So I'll just go ahead and Shekinah, you can go to the next slide.
All right, so as Kendra said, providing verification letters is one of the functions of our office. And personally, it's one of my favorite things to do because we get to talk to youth, ask them about what they're majoring in, what their career goals are. And it's really great because it lets us know that these letters truly do help the youth. And we especially love getting calls back from youth who let us know they got like a full ride scholarship to this and this school, or they were able to access this and this program just because of our letters. So it really definitely does make our day. So in 2021, we had written over 1,675 verification letters. So we served 1,675 former foster youth, which is really amazing. And again, these letters were used in order for that youth to show eligibility for various programs, various benefits. One example being the iFoster free cell phone program. We again will share that with you all later in this presentation. Access to housing programs, getting access to certain records. Reentry, which is what we're going to be mainly talking about today, access to school programs, and numerous other reasons that they contact our office for the letters. But as Kendra described, the main focus that we're going to be working on today and speaking with you all about is the purpose of the letters, specifically for reentry, and some of the services that youth have access to in regards to school, housing, and extended foster care.
So the passage of AB 592, it authorized the California Department of Social Services to provide the former foster youth with written verification of their time spent in foster care. And again, this is for former foster youth and former probation youth who were in and out of home placement. So with this, because with taking the request is the eligibility is like the key piece in order to understand that every youth might not be eligible for a verification letter. So this is what happens when we have youth that are in secured facilities. And if a youth is in a secured facility and they were in a foster care placement, or they had been in an STRTP or anything, and they're going home, then we can write them a letter once they're released, because they're no longer would be in care if they went home. The difference would be that there are a lot of times we get requests from probation officers. There are youth who are in secured track facilities, but they're turning 18 and they're going into a foster care placement. So they're going into extended foster care. If they are going into extended foster care, we cannot write a letter, because at that point, they're not a former foster youth. We can only write it for the time that they have spent in foster care. So at that point in time, they would still be considered to be in foster care. If they needed a letter to verify that status, because they would be considered to be in foster care, they would be able to get that from whoever was like the case carrying name, the social worker on the case or the county. But our office can only provide it if they are no longer in an open foster care child welfare case. Again, which an out-of-home placement in an STRTP, or even an out-of-home placement with a relative, anyone other than going home or just being released and the case being closed, it would not make them the former status, and we would not be able to write a letter. And so if anyone has any other specific additional questions about that, if you address it in the chat, then I'll try to better explain it at later.
Alternatively, if y'all do have questions about your youth's case status, you can always contact our office and ask us directly. We have access to those records, so we will actually be able to see it. And if there's any confusion or discrepancies, we can explain that to you or the youth over the phone. So here is a brief instruction list on how you can request these verification letters. So on the left side is talking about if a youth is in a foster care placement, so they're not in a secured facility. So that youth can just directly contact our office by dialing our hotline at 877-846-1602. And we became a little bit more tech savvy, so we actually now also have an online form. So the youth can also send us a form if they are too shy to call us, and then we'll reach out to them after, so they can also submit it online. And one important thing to note is that a staff member from our office must speak to that youth directly to verify the information needed to process the letter. So sometimes we receive calls from the parents or guardians of the youth calling on their behalf, and unfortunately we would not be able to process that letter unless the youth is able to verify that information with us. So we do have to speak to the youth directly. This point is a little bit different when it comes to youth who are in secured facilities. So if a youth is in a secured facility, if they are having access to a phone, they can call us directly. And if we speak to them directly over the phone, we can completely process the letter, fine. But also the probation officer as well can call on behalf of the youth. And again, this is through our hotline or through our online form. If that youth is not available to speak with us directly to verify their information, and the probation officer or some other staff member is calling on behalf of the youth, our office does have to ask for an ROI or release information to be filled out in order to release that information to the probation officer. So typically when these calls happen, sometimes it is the probation officer calling because they're calling our office because they're trying to get verification letters for a lot of their youth. So Kendra and I have received calls where it's like back to back, and that's totally great. We love that because that means you all are being efficient. Definitely don't be shy to do that if you want to. But when we get those calls, we then have to send a blank ROI to have that probation officer then bring that form to their youth, have that youth sign a release saying that they consent to having their records provided to the probation officer. And then from there, we can process the letter. So that's just an additional extra step if the youth is not available in the secured facility. But again, if for some reason they can't answer the phone, as probation officers or as staff, you all are definitely able to do so on their behalf. You just have to do that additional step of filling out the ROI. But again, if you all have any questions about the most efficient way to request the letters, you can always call our office. And again, feel free to use our online form as well, as that is also pretty efficient too.
So the information that we would need in order to take a request, either verbally or if it was written, would be like the name, the birth name of the person, if their name had been changed, and either or if they were adopted, like what their adopted name would be as well. We would need their date of birth, their social security number if you have it, or at least the last 4 digits, and the county of jurisdiction, which would be the county that had jurisdiction over them when they were in foster care, not the county of placement, because they could be placed in a county, as we know, that's not the jurisdictional county. So we would need the county of jurisdiction regarding that. And when we do get these letter requests, our goal is to fulfill them by the end of the business day. So on individual calls, if a youth calls me, I'm going to have the letter to them within like 20, 30 minutes at the maximum, because I know a lot of them they're at financial aid counters, or they're somewhere where they're calling because they need this letter. So not to try to make them wait again 24 hours, because if they're there and they're active and they want to do something, I want to make sure that they have the resources that they need in order to be able to receive that service. But a lot of times if we get, like so kind of says, the multiple requests with the releases of information or the ROIs, because I've gotten them sometimes, and then with having to categorize it, because this is a new process, I'm trying to make sure that I have all the information and all the data by the counties, who's requesting it from what county and how many letters that we get. But this is the information that we want to track and to be able to have access to. But it is in our goal to get that letter to you by the end of the business day.
Okay, so something that we had mentioned earlier is that in the verification letter, a lot of the benefits that youth are eligible for is really based on the age that they left foster care. So one highlight is that we put the most recent placement episode because that really then determines what the youth is eligible for. So now Kendra and I will kind of take time to share with you all the resources that a youth is eligible for. But again, a lot of these are dependent on the youth's ages. So definitely to take that into consideration, especially when it comes to extended foster care, because there's a specific age threshold for that youth to have met in order to be eligible. Firstly, one that's pretty flexible is financial aid and technology resources. So for youth who are interested in attaining a higher education, there is a JBay financial aid guide for California foster youth. So there's no age limit to this. As long as the youth was in foster care for some period of time, they're eligible for various college programs. And again, Kendra will review that a little bit later in the presentation. But they also have eligibility when it comes to applying for FAFSA. So if they need verification that they were in foster care in order to showcase that when they're filling out their FAFSA, they can contact our office for it. And then the letter again will showcase the dates that they were in care at the most recent time, as well as the age that they left care. And that will then contribute to whatever their contribution for FAFSA will be. Then the second resource is the iFoster free cell phone program. So this is a program that provides free cell phones, tablets, hotspots, and laptops for foster youth. It is applicable for youth who are still in K-12 school, but then the one that really does matter is for the youth who are trying to get into post-secondary education. So if they're trying to get into college, an apprenticeship, even just completing their GED, they'd be eligible for getting a free technology. The age cutoff for this is 13. So they would have to have been in foster care, at least for one day, from the age of 13 up to the age of 26. So they can't be over the age of 26 to have access to this technology. But as long as it shows on the letter that they were in foster care for at least one day on their 13th birthday or later, then they're eligible for this program as well. And then of course, if that youth is still in foster care, K through 12, they're eligible too. So the one that would really be applicable for you all in your population would be the youth who are pursuing post-secondary education programs or those who are finishing up their junior or senior year of high school.
Okay, so when we get into the California Community College programs, there are a lot of resources for youth, former foster youth, and again, justice impacted youth. Youth have been involved in the justice system. So these programs, like the Next Step program, it offers support and services. They could be like help with books and support, transportation, food, emergency housing, EOP&S, which is the Extended Opportunity Programs and Services, which is also a program in the community college. It offers support and services that can help with books and supplies, academic and support counseling, transportation. It's mainly to be first generation, but to be mainly from marginalized populations. So any youth who was impacted by foster care or again by the justice system or in an out-of-home placement would be eligible for the EOP&S program as well. And the Rising Scholars program is a new program in the California Community College, and it is aimed to increase the public higher education access and successes of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated students or scholars. So again, any youth that you work with in this population would be eligible to be a part of any of these programs. And what it does is it kind of limits what you have to compete with and how long of a line you have to stand in order to be able to get services. You have like specialized, because if you're part of EOP&S, then you're going to be a part of a learning community. So you're going to have a counselor, someone to go over your stuff without having to go like to general admission counseling and stand in that line and sit there for 2 hours and maybe not even see a counselor. So it's going to mean that you're going to have access and they're going to have the additional support that they need in order to be successful and to make it through college. The next one, Shapina. So when we get to more CSUs, California State University programs, they have a lot of campus foster youth programs to support current and former foster youth. They have the Guardian Scholars program. I was the Guardian Scholars at Sacramento State. Channel Islands has the PATH program, and East Bay has the Renaissance Scholars program, which are all pretty much just a Guardian Scholar program, which is with different names, again, providing additional supports. to students, making sure that they have access to have food while they're on campus, additional supports. You don't have to compete with the whole student body for like scholarships and additional services. It's additional support and services in order to guide them. EOP. So at the university program, there's the Education Opportunity Program, which is different from the community college because you don't get the services, but you still get the academic support, again, for historically underserved or marginalized students. And Project Rebound, again, a program that supports the higher education and successful reintegration of formerly incarcerated students to enroll and succeed at California State University. And I also was a member of Project Rebound at Sacramento State, and it is a tremendous program to help students who have experienced incarceration in order to be successful in college, provide those additional supports, and to get you on the path to looking at higher education, not just to come to college just to get a degree, but to actually to be able to learn and to be able to support yourself, to be self-sustaining, and to go out and to be able to help and show others like how to really do the same thing. These are all wonderful support programs, and just basically because a person has experienced incarceration, they're eligible for this additional support, which can be very helpful. I know college was hard for me to navigate, even older. So I can imagine just how hard it is for them today. And I realized how hard it was for me when I was young too, exiting foster care and trying to navigate all this and not even having these resources. So they're really phenomenal resources that we really would like for you to take advantage of for the youth who are on your caseloads. So now we'll talk about the UC programs. So they also have campus foster youth programs at the University of California. UC Davis has the Garden Professionals program, Irvine has the FYRE Scholars, and the Los Angeles has the Guardian Scholars. Again, they're all pretty much the same program. They provide the academic and the retention and the support services to people coming from marginalized populations, and the Underground Scholars. So UC Berkeley has the Underground Scholars program, and UC San Diego has the Triton Underground Scholars. And again, these are the same programs that we have like at the community college and the CSU level, just at a different level, but providing again the same support to keep students who are impacted, who are marginalized, who normally would not finish college, to retain and keep them in college.
And all of the links here, it's in blue, it's clickable. So when Rosie does send everyone the PDF, you'll be able to review the different types of programs if you're interested in learning more. All right, now comes the fun part. The one section that we get a lot of questions about, extended foster care or AB 12. Okay, so what exactly is extended foster care? So this program came about after the California Fostering Connections to Success Act was signed on September 30, 2010 through Assembly Bill AB 12, which as we know, and it became effective on January 1st, 2012. So essentially what this law did is that allowed foster care to be extended for eligible youth up until the age of 21. So previously in the past, 18 years old was the cutoff stage, and this law allows us to give youth that additional time to help transition them into adulthood up until the age of 21. Any youth who's participating in extended foster care would now be called a non-minor dependent. And not only does this legislation allow that extension of preparation for the youth, but it also recognizes the importance of family and parency for youth by extending payment benefits and transitional support services for youth who are in AAP or Adoption Assistance Program, KinGAP, Kinship Guardianship Assistance Payment Program, as well as youth who are under non-related legal guardianship. But specifically for the purposes of today's webinar, the main focus is going to be on those youth who are going to be called non-minor dependents and the ones that are entering foster care after having foster care placement history. So as I described before, the main goal of extended foster care is to ensure that youth will be able to maintain a safety net of support while experiencing independence in a supervised living environment. they're able to have extended time in care to address any effects of trauma, obtain educational and employment training opportunities, which is why Kendra and I always emphasize really directing and encouraging students to pursue education, vocational school, et cetera, as well as to develop permanent connections to supportive adults. And then in addition, non-minor dependents can continue participating in independent living program or ILP, which helps them gain the knowledge and skills needed for self-sufficiency and successful transition into adulthood. So as you can see from the rights categories that we reviewed earlier, in regards to education, money management, and preparation for adulthood, all of those tie in together with the purpose of our verification letters, and in turn with the ability for youth to access extended foster care.
And if I can just interject one thing here, because I always tie in, as I talked about AB 12 being new. So when I exited foster care, there was no AB 12, and I really wanted to go to school. So I did enroll at Sacramento City College, but then I was on my own, so I had to work. So I wasn't able to go to school. So that's why I'm really excited about AB 12 and extended foster care, and actually for these youth to have that additional 3 years of support to be able to still go to school and have the support, so that at least by the time that they age out at 21, they would have completed a bachelor's, if not yet already almost to a bachelor's, and to be on a better path of a successful transition and to adulthood, which is really why I encourage them, if to stay in foster care if they can, in order to be able to receive this, because the opportunities that they have for the education and to receive those additional resources and services are just going to be so life-changing and so much better, where they won't have to make the decision on whether they're going to go to school or if they're going to go to work, because those are really, really hard decisions to be able to make. And so again, it's a really important piece to me, and just hoping that everyone understands. And I just wanted to go ahead and just to add that in. So I hope it matters to you all. Okay, Shekinah, I'm done. I'm off.
Thank you, Kendra. That's okay. If there's anything I missed, please jump in. Please do. Okay, so now here comes the big words, the jurisdiction talk. Who exactly is eligible for extended foster care? So there are 3 specific types of jurisdictions that we'll be reviewing with you all today. I do want to highlight there is a specific all-county letter, ACL 1185, that goes into great detail about each of these specific jurisdictions, and then also gives guidance on what probation officers are to do if their youth falls under the jurisdiction to help prepare them for extended foster care. So if you want more of a how to do this, how to prepare the youth, definitely take a look at the ACL. In the time that we have today, hopefully this overview will be sufficient. So the first is transition jurisdiction, which is pursuant to WIC 450. So transition jurisdiction, long word, is a new status that allows older probation youth who have met the rehabilitative goals set forth in their case plan and who met the criteria listed in ACL 1185 to remain in foster care. So transition jurisdiction is for youth that are older than 17 years and 5 months. So they have to be older than 17 years old and 5 months. Whenever there is a hearing in which termination of that youth's jurisdiction is considered, the court can actually modify its order of jurisdiction and assume transition jurisdiction over that youth pursuant to WIC 450 if all the criteria are met. So there is a difference in eligibility of transition jurisdiction between minors and non-minors, and I kind of briefly go over this in this slide, but again, it's more clearly described in ACL 1185. So one thing I want to highlight is that the necessary point for both of these is that the youth must have been in a foster care placement within that time frame. So for minors, they don't have to be 18 years old. This is the part that's really unique, is they don't have to be 18 and in a foster care placement. They can be 17 years old and 7 months in a foster care placement and be eligible for extended foster care. So that tiny window of 17 years old and 5 months to 18 years old, that's the window in which they need to have been in a foster care placement in order for them to be WIC 450 eligible. If that youth is a non-minor, so 18 up to the age of 21, they then do have to have been in a foster care placement and subject to an order for foster care placement on their 18th birthday. So that's a little bit of the difference here. It's a slight difference in the months, but it really is important and impactful when it comes to eligibility for youth. So one thing I want to highlight too is that one of the requirements is that the youth must have met the rehabilitative goals set forth in their case plan. However, even though it says that, one thing I want to highlight is even if that youth did not meet their rehabilitative goals, or you're not sure if they completed everything, and you know that they're eligible based on their age and the time that they had foster care placement history, still help them apply for extended foster care. Because there is guidance that was provided to juvenile courts through ACIN 10719, again, that is in the slide if you want to know more about it, that basically states that because there is no contemplation of termination of wardship without meeting rehabilitative goals, the court does not need to make a finding that rehabilitative goals have been met for a non-minor dependent to re-enter. So essentially, the court has the authority and the jurisdiction to decide, hey, this youth needs these services, this youth met the age requirement, the placement history requirement, we're going to let them in anyways. So to remember that the discretion at the end of the day is to the court and not to the agency itself. So if you ever have any concerns or hesitation about whether or not that youth met those goals, still assist them in applying, because the court can ultimately decide even if that youth did not meet their rehabilitative goals. All right, so that's the first one. Ooh, next one, WIC 300. So this is for youth who have met their rehabilitative goals. Again, as I said before, if you're not sure, you can still assist them in applying, because it is up to the jurisdiction of the court to ultimately decide. And in here, the age limit here is that the youth must be younger than age 18 and they're not eligible for WIC 450. So that means that they are not within that age range of WIC 450. For example, maybe they're like 16 years old or 17 and 3 months years old, and that youth happens to come into the description of WIC 300. So that means that you're preparing that youth to re-enter, but they're not safe to go back home to their parents. And perhaps you might have to consider putting that youth in an out-of-home placement, either with a relative or a resource parent, family, under WIC 300. So this is specifically in regards to if the youth would not be safe returning home to their parents. So this would be specifically for WIC 300. And again, that's only if the youth is not eligible for 450, either because of their placement history or their age. Okay, last one. So this one is WIC, yes.
I'm gonna let you take a breath. I'll go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Kendra.
I'll let you breathe.
Yeah, that's three in a row. Too much. Okay, thank you, Kendra.
So the last one, delinquency jurisdiction would come under youth under the 600 or 602. So there are some youth who enter and end up being in an out-of-home placements or being in foster care without actually coming in as a 300 or being in the child welfare system. And so they are also eligible to complete an extended foster care program. Again, it's while remaining in there on or after their 18th birthday. So again, it's that 18th birthday. So there has to be in that order for foster care placement that occurred no later than their 18th birthday. So prior to them turning 18, they would have had to been in a foster care placement. And again, participating in the agreements or satisfying like one of the 5 participating criteria that's documented in their transition independent living program or their TIL. So again, it's just the only difference would be like maybe like the way that they entered. But if a foster care placement would be again like an out-of-home placement in an STRTP or even with a relative or in a foster family placement. But again, specific to them being in that placement on their 18th birthday in order to be eligible to continue and to participate in foster care. And so a lot of the times we do trainings for the kids as well. Also, when we're able to train the youth and when we talk to them about foster care and staying in extended foster care, like to understand that you are still in foster care. But if a youth that was a 600 youth actually did remain and go into extended foster care, their status would not be a 600 after their turning of the 18. I think they would transition to the 450 because once turning 18, if the probation case was over, then it would just, it's foster care.
Thank you, Kendra.
You're welcome. And so also, when we talk about extended foster care, they have the requirements for eligibility. And so you might see like 5 or 6, but they only have to meet at least one of the requirements. And then if you see the last one is if the youth is unable to do one of a requirement because of a medical condition. If you look at some of the ones like working a job at least 80 hours, so like if the youth is going to school and participating in these wonderful programs that we talked about, like Guardian Scholars, or if they're in like Project Rebound. So they're eligible for additional services and things as well, but they're not having to satisfy the work requirement. Because if there was a youth going to school and they wanted to receive CalWorks, it's like, oh, if you're in school, you have to work 20 hours a week. But if you're a Guardian Scholar or you're a Renaissance Scholar or a Rising Scholar, then that waives those requirements as well to make it a little bit easier. So again, they only have to meet one of them. And if they're going to school, then that's pretty much the eligibility right there. And then sign the agreement to live in an eligible placement, to meet with their social worker or probation officer. They would have to attend court hearings or administrative reviews every 6 months. And again, agree to meet the goals of their transition independent living case plan. So again, why that adulthood and money management piece is just so important, because they're already gaining the skills so that by the time they get to this part, it's easy for them to be able to maintain their eligibility. Okay, Shekinah, you ready?
Yes, thank you. I think I caught enough breath to continue. All right, so as Kendra explained, there are different eligibility requirements. And again, youth only have to meet one of them. Here are the different eligible placements that a youth can choose when they do enter extended foster care. So if that youth is the ages of 19 and below, they can stay in their current relative home, net from home, foster family home, legal guardian home, or group home up until that age. They can go into a THPP or transitional housing program from ages 16 through 18 years old. And then as they age, the types of housing that they're eligible for changes as well. So for youth who are 18 to 21, they could enter a THP plus foster care type of program. If they're up until the age of 18 to 24, it would be a THP plus. And Kendra described this earlier in the presentation, but if that youth is able to pass a readiness assessment to showcase that they're independent enough to be able to handle a SILP, they can also have a SILP. And that could mean having their own apartment, sharing a room with other roommates in a home, or even a college dorm itself as well would be considered a SILP. So one thing to highlight too is that for extended foster care, the cutoff age for receiving those services is 21, but as you can see here, some transitional housing programs extend past that age. So the youth can only receive that extended foster care case management support and services from the county directly up until the age of 21. But as far as housing, that can extend past 24 years old. So sometimes when our office receives calls, oh, sorry, Kendra, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's now 25. We need to update.
Oh, 25.
Yeah, it changed this year with the legislation, so we need to update the PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah, we do.
It's up until 25 now. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, there we go, up until the age of 25. And then sometimes when we receive calls from youth, they are, like say 22 years old, they're trying to find housing. We can still refer, our office tends to still refer them to their county because they're under the age of 24 and could still be eligible for those transitional housing programs, even though they're over the age of 21. So just to consider that as well, that there is a kind of like a double cutoff specifically for the extended foster care case management services piece, and then also the housing piece. Again, till 25, apparently, because of the new update. Okay, so another thing to highlight here is that extended foster care is voluntary and that youth are able to come and go from extended foster care multiple times from the ages of 18 to 21. So youth can also opt out as well and choose not to enter extended foster care. But as we always tell our youth, it's always good to go even just for one day, just so that you have that safety net, so that if you realize you do need additional help when you're 19, 20 years old, at least you can come back and ask for support. So overall, the summary here and guidance that our office can provide you in preparing your youth for reentry is that if your youth is 18 years old or older, but not yet 21, and you determine that they had foster care placement history on their 18th birthday, they are eligible for extended foster care, and definitely help them apply for that program. If you are preparing a youth for reentry and they are not yet 18 years old, consider the different jurisdiction types that we discussed earlier and ask yourself, could this youth fall under the jurisdiction of WIC 450, WIC 300, or WIC 602 to be eligible for extended foster care? It's really important to consider that the youth's 18th birthday is the main cutoff for needing to have foster care placement eligibility to be able to enter extended foster care. But you have to also remember as well that the youth can be younger, and that's only if they fall under WIC 450 when they have foster care history from the age of 17 years old and 5 months onwards. So just remember the magic numbers of 17 years old and 5 months and 18. And that'll hopefully help you figure out who's eligible.
And I think that was our last slide.
All right, thank you both. That was a wealth of info. You are a wealth of information. I know you managed to cover a lot of information in a short amount of time. And so I do want to thank you for all of that. I'm going to do my best to sort of group some of the questions that we've been receiving so that we can get to as many as possible before 3 o'clock. And then and some of them I think you kind of answered as you were going along in your presentation. So the first question is, my understanding is that if out-of-home placement orders were terminated prior to the commitment to DJJ and prior to their 18th birthday, they do not qualify in any way for EFC services or extended foster care. They would, however, still qualify for the education benefits. Has this changed?
No, it sounds like that they kind of said what we said. It is that 18th birthday. So if they're not in a foster care placement on their 18th birthday, as we said, no, they would not qualify for the non-minor dependent extended foster care, but only having to have been in a foster care placement for 1 day after their 18th birthday would, 13th birthday, I'm sorry, would qualify them for all of the other benefits and services that the verification letter provides. And it's education, reentry. I know in Los Angeles, a house for home, they can get housing. They can get their whole house furnished when they get their first apartment just because they were in foster care for like 1 day. So there are still other services, but not the extended foster care.
Okay. Thank you for that. And that actually answered 2 of the questions. And I think that helps us transition to a couple of the verification letter questions that we received. One probation department was sharing that they currently provide a foster youth letter to all of their youth upon exit. And so is the verification letter that you were speaking to, is that different, or would that be similar to?
I'm thinking that it's similar to, and I'm thinking that it's when we get these calls when they call and they ask for their ward or the court letters, because they title themselves different. So I kind of know when I'm speaking to someone that's been justice impacted because they're asking for their letter for the ward of the court. And so I know that some counties do, and it's just basically because all we're providing is their name, their date of birth, the date that they entered foster care, the date that they exited foster care, and how old they were. And then we did and put our name. So if it's that same information, because that's just the basic information, because of the services that they're providing, they just want to know how old were they when they were in foster care and the dates. And so if they have that letter, it suffices as well. And again, that is a good practice because we can only, again, write them for youth who are former foster youth. So it is a good practice if the counties do that, as long as they're providing that same information, it is fine.
Okay, so the letter doesn't need to come from the office from the state. It can come from the county as well, and it achieves the same purpose.
Yes, because on our letters, we put our telephone number, but we also put the phone number for the county of jurisdiction that the youth was in care. And if they were in a probation case, we still put foster care, but we put the main number for the probation office in that county if someone wanted to call and to verify the status. So it's the same thing.
Okay, great. We had another request, if you could send the request of information a release of information, excuse me, to CPOC, and we could send it out to everybody. If sounds like there's a form that you send out so that for those that want to reach out to you, that's a step they can get done in advance. So I don't know if that's something that you could send to us, but we would be happy to distribute that to everyone if that's available.
I will check on that. I just have to make sure, you know, that in the state people stuff. And if I can send it to you, Rosie, I'd be more than happy to, because it would cut down a step, because when they communicate to us, then we have to send them the form. So if it was something that you guys could already make available, then that would cut out an extra step. So I can get that information and find that out today.
Yeah. Thank you, Kendra.
You're welcome.
And then another question that came through that's similar to one we sort of just talked about, but in case there was anything, this garners anything new or different information for the services that were reviewed today. And there might be some nuances to some of the education services and some of the extended foster care. But do the youth have to be a former foster youth, or are youth subject who are on probation but not a former foster youth? Are some of the services available to them? They don't have to have been a former foster youth.
Oh, no, please let me clarify. So the only one that they would probably have to be a former foster youth for would be the Guardian Scholars Program. And that's just dependent on like what campus, because sometimes you can have been in foster care or you could have just experienced homelessness, depending on the program. But for all the other programs like Project Rebound, Rising Scholars, the Renaissance Scholars, it is that probation or that justice impacted piece. So just having been being incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, they don't have to have that out-of-home placement or that foster care. It's the part about them being justice impacted that actually makes them eligible for those programs. And again, when I was talking about it, that's why I always say marginalized populations, because being on probation and coming from a lens of having experienced incarceration, that's marginalized. So they would be eligible for those programs. All these programs that I talked about, they would be eligible for these programs.
Okay. Thank you, Kendra. And so, and Shakina, so the foster care piece really comes into play, the foster care placement for the reentering extended foster care upon exiting DJJ, if you had that foster care order earlier on prior to meeting those age requirement sort of framework that you mentioned earlier on.
Yes, and I noticed when I was going like into the DJJs, there had been some youth that might not have ever experienced an out-of-home placement through probation, but they had been in foster care prior to being committed to DJJ. So that would make them eligible again for like all the education and everything else, but just not the extended foster care.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Another question, going back to the education side, there was a question if for Project Rebound, you know, does that program help provide laptops or other technical equipment for the youth that participate in young adults?
Yes, let me tell you about Project Rebound because Project Rebound helped me get through my grad school. So I just completed grad school at Sacramento State. And because we went through the pandemic and we were at home, everything went virtual, and with having to come home and not having like a laptop or anything. So I was able to get a laptop through Project Rebound through like student affairs, so that I was able to use it and keep it at home through every semester. They even provided me with a printer for being enrolled in that program. There's so many like services, Project Rebound, they give like gift cards, like you'll just get here's $300 worth of Walmart or Safeway gift cards, because they know that students need resources. So it's all the additional support. I can't even name like all the things, but anything that they needed, they get book scholarships. Project Rebound helps pay for books. So that's why I talk about and promote these programs. It's a phenomenal, anything a student, because I can say a student could just need something and you can go and say, hey, I need this, and they're going to get it. So I just can't tell you like all the wonderful things that program can do and provide, and to help students be successful and graduate from college.
Yeah. And I think it's worthy of noting, just for those listening, that Kendra just finished her graduate program. So just want to congratulate you on that success and that accomplishment. Because I know that you're just waiting for your printed copy of your thesis.
Yes, I'm going to send that to you today, Rosie. It's on the school to prison pipeline, everybody. So if I just sound a little too passionate for you, that's why, because this is the work that I do, and I'm really, really very passionate about it. So thank you again.
Yeah, and I know another question, and this is where I think we probably can't reiterate these components enough about sort of how one's eligible and at what point if their order was terminated or not. So we have another question related to that I wanted to review. And it's the eligibility period continues after youth is released from DJJ or a secure track commitment if they had a placement order on their 18th birthday that was later terminated, or if they had a previous 300 status prior to the commitment. So I think it's going back to whether the placement order was terminated at the time of their commitment to DJJ. Are they still eligible for the extended foster care?
No. No, and then there's like some, because that's why we put the guidance of like the ACLs, because then there's some talk about sometimes and I'm not a judge, but either suspended or set aside the order because and that would probably be determined by like the age of the youth. Is the youth going to come out of this facility prior to them turning 18, or is it going to be like after they're 18? If they're going to be 19, then it really doesn't matter. I think as far as looking at that, but sometimes when I'm looking and I'm reading the orders, they're like, it's either a suspended or set aside. And then the talk in the ACL is that from the probation side of it would be something that we would go back to court to attempt for the judge for a suspended one for the order to be put back into place. But if it's terminated, then it's terminated.
Right. And my understanding is that if the youth had that placement order at the time of their 18th birthday when they were committed to DJJ and they exit DJJ, say they're 20 years old, they cannot be under a 602 status and in extended foster care. So if at the age of 20, they, or say at the age of 20, maybe their period of supervision is very short, and their placement order was terminated upon completion of their probation supervision, at that point, if they had not yet reached 21, for whatever period of time is left before they turn 21, they could try and seek to receive extended foster care services for that period of time. It may be a small window of time,
right?
But they could seek to do that.
They could through the court. So that's what
Yes.
we talked about, that they would go through the court, and then at that point, it would be the transition to the 450, if I'm correct. I think that would be.
Yes.
Mhm.
So, and I know it's very technical, and so I've actually also been talking to judicial counsel as well to see how we might be able to package some information to make it as clear as possible.
Yes.
But do you think
It's the wording? What's the wording? I don't want to say like the wrong word because I'm saying it and that's not like what they meant. And they don't always use the same word. So it's like confusing to interpret it for them. So, yeah.
Yes. Another question I want to make sure that we got to on a slightly different topic. There was a request if we could please repeat the extension to age 25 where we were speaking about the THP housing.
Okay. Yes, and we didn't update it. It's new and it's gonna actually be announced. Well, John Burton is actually having a webinar on the 31st. So, but I just know that it's gonna change. The law has changed, it already has, and they're gonna be announcing that youth will now be receiving an additional year of housing through the transitional housing program. So instead of it being 24, it'll now be 25, which basically means that they can stay in that housing now until the day before they turn 26, because before it was like through 24. So meaning one day before they turn 25, they had to be out of it. So now it would be like a day before they turn 26 because now it's through 25. And they'll be announcing that. They're having a webinar on the 31st, John Burton, to actually announce. That's going to be a part of the webinar.
Oh, great.
The extension,
So I think the last question, I think we can get to in the time that we have. And I think we pretty much covered all of them, but this last one was referencing back to the 1,675 letters. There was someone was just curious, were those letters specific to youth seeking extended foster care or youth reentering, or is it just verification letters for any youth who might be eligible?
It's a mix. I'm sure that we can pull data to show the specific reason, because when we do receive calls, we do code why the youth is asking for the letter, and reentry is an option, as well as benefits and services. But that's just in general. So any youth who contacted our office and needed a letter, that's how many we were able to serve. But that's a great idea. Maybe next time we can break it down and kind of see the specifics.
Yeah, because we have it. We keep the data on the letters. And then, mind you, I talked about LA County has this phenomenal program. When former foster youth get their first apartment, they furnish it. And so we get a lot of calls from people that are getting services from a house called home. So it could be for that. And again, most of them are for school, the purposes of school, the calls that we get, but they're different. But we do like keep the data, and a lot of them just for like reentry. Like I just want it for my personal reasons, or I'm reentering. They told me to call and get this letter. The majority of it, somebody told me to call you guys and ask you for this letter, and it's like a lot of them don't even know like what the letter is for or what it's going to do. But somebody told them to call us and ask for it, and so we provided for them. But we could actually get that data.
Yeah, great. Well, I do want to really thank both of you, Kendra and Shekinah, for all the wonderful information and for spending your time this afternoon and getting through all of those questions, and to Aaron as well. Just thank you for your time, for your commitment and partnership, and really look forward. I'm sure all of you will be receiving emails and questions post this webinar due to all the great information that you shared, but do want to thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us, and thank you to all of our attendees. Hope this information has been very helpful to all of you. This information, as I mentioned, the webinar was recorded, so once we have that up online, we'll make sure to let everyone know. And then we will also be sending out copies of both of the presentations to everyone. So thank you all for your time this afternoon. Have a great weekend, and we will speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.